Hello, my lovelies, and welcome back to Strange Playgrounds, and welcome back to my series taking a look at the Black Shuck Shadows series of collections, a collection of horror short story books. All of which are written by different writers from all over the place, from the UK largely, but also from other places around the world, published under the Black Shuck label. As mentioned in previous installments, each of these collections is absolutely beautiful. They're all aesthetically very similar, but with different symbols and colour coding, which it not only distinguishes the books, it also gives you a suggestion of what their cohering subject matter is. Each of the short story collections has its own particular subject or theme that unifies all of the short stories within. We've already taken a look at Dan Coxon's Green Fingers, which was absolutely beautiful, and Kit Power's Voices, which was powerfully interesting. Now we're on book 13, no particular order here. We're taking a look at Penny Jones's Suffer Little Children. Now, the title alone should give you some indication of what this collection is about, of its cohering theme, if you like. And unlike the other books that I've read thus far, I'm going to place a big ass warning at the beginning of this one. Suffer Little Children. It's not just stories about children. It's not just stories that involve children as their principal subject. The theme, the cohering theme, is childhood itself, and it's unsentimental about that. That's something from the get-go, this is a stunning short story collection, by the way. I'm just going to say that right now. It is an absolutely stunning short story collection. But it is powerfully disturbing because it is an unsentimental look at the vagaries and the complexities and the nuances of childhood itself, of not only of being a child in all of its neurosis and confusion and complexity and cruelty, but also in terms of children's relationships to the world around them. So it's also a book about parents. It's a book about how parents relate to their children, but also the fact of being parents, whether they're prepared for it or not, or whether they want it or not. There are short stories in here that are really horrible. I mean, really powerfully unpleasant, and they resonate with experiences that are not only very specific, but which are also often universal. So Penny takes a look at childhood without rose-tinted glasses, without sentiment, and she explores every element of that condition, of that state. And it's actually a bit of a sidebar for me. I have a real thing about writers who write about children and write about the experience of being a child, but who have clearly forgotten what it's like to be a child, who just make the children characters in their stories into little adults, essentially, or into sort of prescribed templates of what adults believe or presume children to be in a sort of sentimentalized way. I hate that. I absolutely loathe that. Penny doesn't do that. She really doesn't do that. The child characters in these stories, which are often the protagonists, the stories are often from the perspectives of either parents or children. The children protagonists are complex. They are psychologically complex entities. They are not these hideous, narrow, sentimentalized creatures. They are cruel, often without context, without motivation, without any clear reason why. They're often unthinkingly jealous and stupid and unpleasant. They are often at odds with the world around them, not only with their parents, but they're confused about their place in it. And I really appreciate that. It's the truth. That's something I look for when I come to fiction. It's not fact, it's truth, it's sincerity. It's someone who has looked at their own experience of the world of reality and other people's experience of the world and reality and have tried to narrativize it, to record it in some meaningful way, to find some poetry in it, however dark, however unpleasant that poetry may be. And that's what this book is about. It's almost like it's almost like Penny's trying to skewer or to puncture the preconceptions of childhood that exist within fiction. You're not going to find like Lucy from the Chronicles of Narnia here. You're not going to find Harry Potter here. You're going to find real children who are experiencing the real world in an emotionally complex way, and are doing so in a very dark way. I mean, the one of the stories that really stood out to me in its lack of sentiment is Swan Song. Swan Song is from the perspective of a child who's no different from any other child. He's sort of jealous of his younger brother. He doesn't really like his younger brother. He's got a distorted perspective of his younger brother because there's not many years between them, and the younger brother is kind of taking over his territory. He's kind of cruel to the child. He's unpleasant to the child, and he's also frustrated and doesn't really know his place in the world. And there's a tragedy in it that isn't anyone's fault, really. It's no one's fault. It's just a really dark set of circumstances that derive from some of I hesitate to say it, but the natural cruelties of childhood, the natural conflicts that occur. And also, to a degree, there is a degree of parental inadequacy here. The parents hardly occur in this short story. They hardly occur at all. But there is this unspoken absence when it comes to the parents, as though they're not emotionally available. And that's another thing that this book does. It also takes an unsentimental look at parenthood as well. The prescribed narratives that refer to parents and to children about how, oh, you fall in love with your children and blah, blah. Oh, that you love your children without condition and without hesitation. That's simply not true, and this book explores that, and I really, really appreciate that. There are stories in here about parents who realise that they probably shouldn't have been parents. The Changeling, just from the title alone, the very notion of the Changeling, an old folkloric tale about fairies and fey creatures. The Changeling is a creature that originally, the story goes that it would sneak into the homes of parents, steal newborn children, and take their place. But it's actually what Penny's exploring is what that story tells us about our culture and about the place of children within it, and about how parents are often very afraid of their children, don't understand their children, can't cope with their children. And that's what this is about. It's about a parent, a father, who realizes that he probably didn't want to be a father at all and probably isn't cut out for it, and hates his child, or grows to hate his child. And it's a really dark, very honest look. I wonder, reading this and having read similar stories, having seen it in real life, how many people that happens for, because there is this prescribed narrative in culture that you should be a parent, that being a parent is kind of like the highest aspiration. How many people who are not cut out for it, who don't want it, end up becoming parents and then become bad or abusive parents as a result? What Penny is doing all the way through this book is just skewering these prescribed narratives of what you should be, of what you should do, of what it means to be a parent, of what it means to be a child. It's really, really clever and massively uncomfortable. I imagine if you're a parent reading this book, it will bring up stuff. It will bring up stuff that's really, really dark and difficult. There's almost like there is a postpartum depression quality to some of these stories, where parents in the aftermath of birth, they realize that their relationship to their child is more emotionally complex than what prescribed narrative tells them it should be. And I like that, because that's the truth. That's the dark, unpleasant truth of it, Penny's trying to get to that. She's trying to reach down into those really dark, unexplored waters that many of us don't want to look at. We don't want to explore, especially if we are parents or if we have a particular relationship to our parents. It's a really beautiful thing that this short story collection is doing, and it's it deserves more. This kind of short story collection, yeah, it's going to trigger people, and I mean that in the sincerest way. I don't mean in like the popular parlance way the internet uses that term. Oh, it's just going to make people upset. No, 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 no. This is going to resonate with experiences that so many of us have and so many people have, and it's going to bring up the darkness. It's going to bring up the complexity. Beneath Still Waters, the opening short story, which is the longest in the whole thing, it's a story about guilt, it's about ambiguity, it's about depression, and it's about despair. It's about how accidents are so common and how fragile children are, and how the slightest bit of neglect, that not even neglect, but just looking away for an instant can result in tragedy and destroy entire lives, can destroy relationships, how corrosive that loss is. It's about there's a suicidal element to the story which is going to be very powerful. That's what I mean by triggering. It's going to resonate with really powerful emotional experiences, and you need to be aware of that when you pick this short story collection up. For my money, I actively go out looking for that. I want that. Even with my darkest and most despairing of experiences, I want to feel that experience. I want to feel that very black subconscious resonance where very unpleasant states of mind come resurging back up. I think fiction is a great way of dealing with that. I think it's a great way of exploring that. I mean, the last story in the collection is very specific in that regard. Waxing it's a very clever story. You very rarely get stories like this. You very rarely get stories that are legitimately from the perspective of an abuse victim. That's what this story is about. But it's not. Most stories that deal with abuse objectify the abuse victim. You see the abuse victim from the perspective of other people. You don't get to see their internal experience and the complex way in which they're relating to both their abuser, the abusive culture in which they were raised, and also how they regard people who are trying to maybe help them. But this story does it. This story does it so sincerely. It makes me wonder. Like, how deep Penny has gone into this, because it makes me wonder like what her experiences are, because it's so sincere, it's so legitimate. Because I in my daily work I actually have to study abuse and abuse victims, and I've worked with abuse victims, and this is real. It's so real. It shows you the genuine complexity of abuse victims, especially when they're children, especially when they're raised in a culture and an environment where abuse is normalized, how they can come to associate positively with their abuser and the abusive situation, and regard the people who are trying to help them or to identify the abuse as their enemies. Yeah? That's what this story is about. It's so dark, it's so unpleasant, and it's so brilliant. It's so brilliant. This is, this was a very, very powerful one for me. Very powerful. It is one I will warn you to be wary of. Suffer Little Children is one to be wary of if you happen to, for example, have experiences with traumatic or abusive backgrounds, if you happen to have experiences with grief, with loss. But it may also help in that regard. It may also help because I think that this is what horror fiction can do. This is what horror fiction should do, for my money. They're stories that aren't just trying to be distractionary or diversionary. They want to engage you, they want to grab you and to resonate with your experience and to provide you a means of confronting it and exploring it, of identifying with the emotional complexity of others. It's a really, really brilliant collection, and I would say is worthy of a place on anyone's bookshelf. I was really impressed with this one. Just devoured it. Its darkness. It's just as, it's even shorter than the others. This one is 106 pages, so even shorter than the previous two. But its darkness and its weight might make it more difficult for people to get through in that regard, because it is dark. It is really unpleasant. but I loved it. I've got to say, I absolutely loved this short story collection. One last short story in the collection that I actually really loved, Swimming Out to Sea. Swimming Out to Sea was me. That's what really did it for me. Swimming Out to Sea is about a kid, well, not a kid really, there's sort of like an older child, like a teenager almost, who is having a difficult time with their parents on holiday, isn't being allowed to do what they want to do, and so sort of throws a kind of passive temper tantrum whereby they swim out to sea away from their parents, and then something almost surreal, almost metaphysical happens, and they can't get back, and when they eventually get back to the beach, wounded and weary, things have changed. They can't find their parents, and it's almost like they're in a nightmare scape. It's really cool. It's about distorted reality, a distorted emotional reality more than anything. Really beautiful, really stunning piece of work, and yeah, I cannot recommend this more highly. I really can't. Penny Jones, as a result of this, Penny will be one I'll be looking out for again. When next we come back, my loves, we'll take a look at another book in the Black Shuck Shadows series. Until then, bye bye.